Thanks for joining us on In Focus on ABC 10. I'm Trent Bailey. I'm here with Matt Goss, who's just very recently announced that he's going to be running as a Republican for the 109th District seat in Michigan. Matt, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For the people that don't know who you are, since it's very early in this process, you want to just give your background and what you did before and how you got to this point?
Sure. So I joined the military when I was 17 years old. You know, it was very early on in you know, my life. I always knew I was going to join the military. It was just a thing that was in our family. It was just something you did. So I joined the military when I was 17, and I did 6 years of service in the military. When 9/11 happened, you know, we got deployed over to the Middle East, and I was in Saudi Arabia for Operation Enduring Freedom, Desert Spring. And right when we were supposed to get ready to come home, the war in Iraq started. So there was no outgoing flights. You know, we got stuck there, you know, for that war. So I did my service there, and then we rotated back home after that was done. And I was contacted by some other government agency personnel that were looking for civilian government employees, you know, to do different types of service, you know. So I looked into that, and I got hired on as actually a civilian contractor working directly for the government. So I got into, I guess, training mode, teaching people, Marines and things like that had never been downrange before, you know, convoy operations and weapons manipulation, things of that nature. And that led to some bigger and better things. You know, I went from an instructor position into actually doing protection for the government. And I was in Afghanistan for a while, and then we had some positions open up at the embassy in Baghdad, where I transferred from Afghanistan over to Iraq. And I worked on counter-assault teams and did helo ops and things like that over in Baghdad for quite a few years. During that time, it was a rough time. That was right when the surge was starting to happen, and we worked directly for the government. You know, so they used us for a lot of things that the military couldn't even do. So, you know, we lost some of our guys. It was a dangerous job, you know, and I was injured numerous times, you know, in that point in service to the country, you know. So I guess in total I spent about 10 years in the Middle East in different arenas. I did everything from, you know, I wore the uniform of a soldier, you know, and then I went into doing government work, and I've protected presidents, vice presidents, and, you know, senators and congressmen all the way down. And what that did is it really enlightened me on the way government works. And I guess that's what I was trying to get to here, you know. But it gave me an inside look, you know, because I'm dealing with really high-ranking people, and I'm seeing how these things work, how the wheels turn. And I found that it was something I was actually really good at, you know. And we always did anything we could to support, you know, our government. You know, the guys I worked with, they were retired SEALs and Special Forces and things like that, and we all had the same idea, which was, you know, we don't know what to do if we're not serving our country. Right. You know, it's not like you get done doing that and you come home and, you know, just get a regular job, and you know, because you can't change your personality. Right. So that's kind of how I ended up getting to where I am here today. Is I never felt like I was finished serving my country. Protecting the country and defending the Constitution is something that is ingrained in the fabric of what is me. Right. And physically, I've been damaged so many times in service to the country that I can no longer fight for the country on a battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of left me with, well, you know, how can I continue to protect this country and its people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, since I can't do it physically. But my mind has always still been sharp,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So here I am.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in, you know, I'm a candidate for the 109th district,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and for state rep. And I think with the experience that I have, that I gained overseas, and at home, I've worked in federal law enforcement. You know, I've trained police academies, so I've also worn the uniform of a police officer, both civilian, federal side. I've worked Department of Defense, you know, as a government employee, and it's just something that I've always enjoyed doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I always will do. So at this point in my life, this stage, I think this is the best way that I can continue to serve the citizens of this country, you know, by starting off here and see where this takes me. You know, but I'll always have the welfare of this country, the Constitution, and the people first and foremost before myself, because that's what I do. I serve the country and I serve the people.
And I know you didn't mention this, but people might hear your voice and go, "Oh, he sounds a little bit different than me." Where'd you grow up at?
Well, actually, you'll talk to a lot of people that served in the military for a long time, or they've been in these deployed environments. Yeah. You actually get kind of a melted pot of an accent, you know, between the guys. But I grew up actually in Maryland. Okay. My wife was born and raised in Baraga.
Oh, okay.
And we have family all over the UP.
Yeah.
I would deploy for sometimes years at a time, and so I didn't really have you know, an address. Ever since I was 17 years old, I pretty much have been going where the government tells me to go. You know, and so my wife she's retired from the Army as a counterintelligence agent, and she did 20 years, and she's a Bronze Star recipient and all that. I actually met her in Baghdad back in 2007. Wow. Yeah, and I hadn't been on leave in a couple of years. Yeah. And, her and I, you know, we started talking, and she was coming home on leave, and we were going to visit. She was going to visit family here, and she asked me, you know, well, you haven't been on leave in a couple of years. You know, do you want to come, you know, meet my family? I said, sure. You know, so we came to Harvey, you know, right there in Marquette, and you know, I absolutely fell in love with this place because I grew up, you know, basically on a horse farm out in Maryland, surrounded by cornfields and things of that nature, and this is an environment and that I needed. I fell in love with the place. I'm still in love with it, and I'm actually the one that told her after we got married that this was going to be home. Yeah, and that's exactly what we did, and that's how I ended up here, and that's why I have kind of a southern accent.
Well, I mean that's a good way to, you know, kind of just describe how you got here from where you were at. So having all this experience working in the military, the federal government, you know, doing all these different things, how do you think that will specifically, you know, help you if you were to be elected into this position?
One of the things that we used to have to do, we used to have to remain contractually compliant. You know, and now when I was just an E1 private in the Army, I mean, what does you know, compliant mean? You don't care at that level. You're being told what to do, when to sleep, when to eat, you know. And but then over a career of almost 20 years that I spent in service, I went from that E1 private all the way up to what was the equivalent to a full-bird colonel, and I was responsible now for what I used to be, you know, the people that are just starting off, you know. So that being said, I started learning the what they call the colors of the money. You know, well, you can't touch that. That's green money. This is blue money. You know, you can't use this money to pay for that, and so forth. And then it was, you know, dealing with budgets. So one of the things that I saw that just still makes me sick today is the waste of money. You know, I would see where you're coming up to the end of the fiscal year, and they say, you know, you got use it or lose it funds. Well, you know, we're not talking, you know, $100 and you go out and buy a bunch of reams of paper. Right. You know, we're talking tens of millions of dollars, and you see equipment coming in that you're like, well, we don't need that. You know, why is that coming here? But you're saying we don't have enough funds to get the guys new boots, right, or night vision goggles, but you just bought, you know, 5,000 up-armored Suburbans, you know, that are going to sit on a flight line somewhere and never be used because you didn't want to. So being at the levels that I was on, and the arenas that I've served, I've seen holes in the budget, and how, and I have ideas on how to fix these things. One of the things I've learned over the course of my career is that unless if you're willing to step up into the position, you know, say if you're a superior, don't complain about the way they do things. That's one side of it. The other side is don't come to me with a complaint unless if you have a solution or you're willing to work with me to get a solution. Both of those things are, to me, it's another thing that's just ingrained in me. Right. I don't complain unless if I think about what am I complaining about, what's a solution to this problem, and how can we best do this? Because you can't just come up with an idea and say, you know, we're going to do this. You have to look at funding and you know, where's this money coming from? Is this going to require more personnel, equipment, assets, things of that nature? So I think my mind works very tactfully. I'm always thinking of a solution, but how do we make that solution happen? You know, and then so that's, I think, how my experience working for the government has shaped me to work in a position like this. And
right away with budgets, you think that's something that the state of Michigan needs to work on?
Absolutely.
And what specifically would you say could really use some better solutions when it comes to the budget?
You know, obviously I don't have access. I can't just walk in and get access to the books.
Right.
But what I've observed on every level of government that I've worked is that we've had issues, you know, over the years that required solutions, and we come up with these solutions, but they cost money. These are programs, for example, you know, say like within the state of Michigan or within this district, there may be programs still being funded today that were a good idea 10 years ago, you know, and they did their job, but somebody came up with that solution and they put it into play, and they're still being funded, but it's not necessary anymore. And there's people on payroll, you know, working in these positions, and there's money being pushed into it that maybe we don't need them anymore. So I guess what needs to happen is an audit of these programs. Where look where the money is going into, and do we still need that program, or can we change a program to better suit our needs for today? So there might be programs that might be in place 100 years from now, but 100 years from now, the way it worked today might not work 100 years from now. Right. So you make these programs more efficient, and that's where you start to see you can save money here and apply that money towards something else. Like we're talking about the gas tax, you know, to fix the roads. Well, you know, I want the roads fixed. I mean, to drive down my road in Gwen, you need a good dental plan, you know, because it's rough. But I'm sure there's money out there to fix some of these problems without digging into people's wallets. Right. You know, you know, more taxes and things like that are going to hurt people that are just trying to squeak by. You know, I mean, this is taking money out of people's budgets for their kids' school clothes and their school supplies and things like that. And that's not I hate that. So I want to look at other solutions before asking people for more tax.
Right. And that is one of the main issues that you have listed on your website. Is something that you're want to work on is fixing the roads. People on both sides of the aisle are always saying they want to fix the roads and they want to fix infrastructure, and yet it seems like we're always stuck in this rut every single time. How would you go about working even across the aisle if you were to be elected into this seat to make sure something happens that makes sense?
You say working across the aisle. I've worked directly for the Bush White House and the Condoleezza Rice State Department, and I've also worked directly for Hillary Clinton under when she was Secretary of State, and underneath Obama. I used to sit on venue with say Clinton staff, and we would have discussions for hours. One thing we never did was argue. The way I look at it is that everybody's opinion matters, and I always believe that if they're sitting on this side of the table and I'm sitting on this side of the table, that if we can have a calm, informed discussion, that by the time we're done, the answer is on the table because we've talked about it as adults.
Right.
So I'm willing to sit down with anybody and have a productive discussion that is for the greater good of the people of this district or of any district. If I can help anybody, then I'm going to. I think communication is so important, and this idea of people arguing all the time and slinging mud at each other, it doesn't get things done. A business cannot operate like that. You can't walk into any business and have your employees and your management just screaming at each other all the time and think that you're going to turn a profit.
Right.
Well, this is no different. You have to get along, and you have to work towards an end goal. And that's what I'm willing to do, is do anything that I have to do to work towards an end goal that is productive. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Well,
but
yeah, it does part of it. But for specifically the roads, the governor notably wanted the gas tax, the 45-cent gas tax increase over a period of time. How would you sit down with people that may be proponents of that and say, let's find a different way to do it? What specifically would you be bringing to the table to say, this is how we should tackle this problem?
We as state representatives should be willing to sit down and look at programs within our districts. And this is what I was kind of talking about earlier, where I believe that there is enough money going into the UP and the districts to solve any of these issues. We already have a budget that's for roads. We need a little more to get them back on track. Yes, the money's there. It's just a matter of taking the time and assigning people to look through unnecessary expenditures and kind of dialing that down a little bit, and then taking the savings and applying it towards that. It's the same thing, if you think about it on people think it's really complicated, but it's not. Think about it on its most simple level. Your own budget in your home. So if you need to put new countertops in your kitchen, but it's just outside of the budget, you look and you say, well, I can't just walk in and get a raise at work. I can't go to my neighbor and say, hey, I need you to pay for my countertop. You've got to come up with a solution. So you look at your budget in your house and you say, well, I can cut back on eating out every day because I can just pack my lunch and bring it to work. I can cut down on this, cut down on that, and then before you know it, you've saved up money to buy your countertops. You did not pull money in from an outside source. You just renegotiated your budget to fit your needs. Well,
but in this analogy, though, Michigan has the worst infrastructure this side of the Mississippi. We're not talking about just countertops. We're talking about cabinets in the whole kitchen.
Exactly.
So isn't that a little bit more of a hurdle to get over to accomplish this?
It is, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that I have looked at the books and that this is how we're going to do it. But that business plan works. That model works. You know, because there is money out there that can be applied towards different needs of the community and of the district. So yes, the money's there, and you know I think that needs to happen before they go and say we're not going to look at this and we're just going to start throwing a gas tax out there to make this happen. I think there's other ways to go about it than hurting people's wallets.
And all right, and just to kind of shift gears, but another one of your points on your website, one of the issues that you are passionate about is the energy prices in the Upper Peninsula, and especially with like Line 5 and that big topic. You want to just give a brief overview of like what you think can be done about the energy prices that are in the UP, which are higher than most places in the country right now?
The Line 5 and you know, the tunnel and all that stuff. People, as soon as people hear pipeline, it's game over. People start arguing over this and that. It's going to be bad for the environment. You know, it's going to do this. It's going to do that. But this is something I know a little bit about. You know, when it comes to what goes into creating these pipelines and things of that nature, they are so efficient, and they're so technologically advanced. You know, you're not just gluing together some PVC and throwing it under the ground and walking away. I mean, these things, they are monitored by, you know, unmanned vehicles, you know, underwater and things of that nature. There are pressure gauges all over those things. There's people that just sit and their only job is to wait for pressure to rise or to drop and figure out where the problem is and get somebody on it to fix it immediately.
Well, maybe these days, but Line 5 is 60 years old or 50 some years old.
That's why we need to look at making that more efficient. Now, the alternative is, well, okay, we're not going to not need the we're not going to need the oil and the natural gas.
Right.
You can't say, well, we don't want it up here. We need it. So that is, we know that's concrete. Now it's how do we get it here? If you say, you know, we're doing away with, we're scrapping this, we don't like it, you know, let's not put any more money into that, and we start bringing these things up here and, you know, trains and trucks, then that's going to cost more. That's going to drive the prices up, you know, because you have to transport it. Trucks, you know, they're putting out CO2 emissions and things like that are, you know, that people are also worried about. They're also tearing up the roads. So then we get right back to, you know, people want to fix the roads, but people don't want to support the Line 5, you know, and getting that back up to speed. So you'll never be able to make everybody happy. Right. But what you can do is make smart, sound decisions and look at, you know, we want to keep the trucks off the roads because that's going to drive our prices up. And we want to keep the trucks off the roads because they tear up the roads. The Line 5 and getting that as working as efficiently as possible is the most cost-effective and safest way to transport these materials that we need from point A to point Z.
So do you believe that the tunnel is the solution for that?
Yes, I do.
All right. And obviously there's a lot of pushback against that with the Attorney General right now. If you were to be elected, what would you do to try to help make sure that all goes through? You
know, I've talked to some other lawmakers actually about that, and all you can do is your job. You know, people have the ability to sit and talk to their representatives, which is where I hope to be someday, and we talk about solutions to these problems. So you talk to people that know and people that are actually involved in Line 5, or people that are actually looking at how are we going to make this happen. You talk to them, you come up with solutions, and you just make it happen. But arguing gets nothing done.
Right.
But talking to people that know, and then coming up with solutions, and then turning around and putting those solutions into play, that's how you get things done, and that's progress. You know, the bottom line is we need the resources, and getting them here through a pipeline is the safest and most efficient way to do it. We can't constantly rely on shipping these materials.
Right. So what do you think could be done overall to help improve the energy prices of, you know, natural gas and these sort of things around the Upper Peninsula? Like I said, very high prices for energy up here, disproportionately so, especially around the state. What do you think could be done to, if you were to be elected, to kind of help curb that?
Anything that you need, that you want to work better, you know, something you need to look at making it more efficient. And you can't make it more efficient without finding out what the problems are. When you find out what those problems are, then you need to find somebody that knows how to fix that problem. The more efficient that we can make the transport of these materials, I just call them materials. You got all different sorts of things that would be coming through the pipeline, but the more efficient that you can make that process, then the cheaper it is to get those materials. Right.
And kind of on the same aspect, but a little bit different here, the people that are against the Line 5 pipeline are environmentalists mainly, and the environment's a huge part of the Upper Peninsula and the culture. You just mentioned CO2 emissions. Is the environmental and like green energy and that sort of stuff, are those issues that you're for and like willing to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually worked in you know, solar and things like that, and I think it's I think it's you know, the way of the future. I mean, it's not efficient right now is the problem. You know, it might work for a person to put solar panels on their house, so let's say, and they can zero out their electric bill. That works for them, but where we're falling short is like the rare earth metals and things like that to go into the production of you know, the batteries for hybrid cars and things like that. There's still an impact on the environment to make these things. Even though overall you're getting better gas mileage with a hybrid car, the process to make that hybrid car is still being tweaked. Now, internal combustion engines, when they were first invented, they weren't running anywhere near as efficient as they are now.
Right.
So, you know, through the invention of catalytic converters and then you know, all that stuff, we have made those vehicles better for the environment. But we're starting to see a transition into hybrid vehicles and then electric vehicles.
Right.
Now, the bottom line is that transition will happen someday. It might be 10 years from now, it might be 50. But eventually, we're going to see that we're driving something that is better for the environment. But along the way, you're going to see that there's problems that we need to fix along the way. But unless if we're progressing towards something better, you never actually run into problems. So actually having the issues we're having are a good thing because we're making progress. We just need to fix these things and make more efficient. More efficient means you know, better for the environment and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think times like this, it actually drives up innovation. You know,
it does.
One of the big things that happened under Obama's presidency was, you know, the gas mileage thing that he put on when he had the bailouts for the car companies. But and a lot of people kind of fault him for that, and some of them have been rolled back by now. But I think it drove a competition, like, oh, Ford wanted to be better than Chevy, wanted to be better than all these guys, so it kind of actually made everything a little bit better. And that's kind of what you're talking about when these issues come up. All right, so what are some other major points that you are running on? Some things that you see around the district, around the state that you think can be improved on?
Let's let's look at something else that that seems to get overlooked in today's political world. Is people that know me will tell you I'm genuinely a nice person. I'm the guy that I plow my neighbors' driveways. And if I'm out, I bring their trash cans back in, things like that. And I do that, and my whole life I've been like that. The political arena that we're in, and I said I used it earlier, mudsling and all that. I don't like that. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because I would like to be an example for other people that may step up into this position to actually, when you're doing these campaigns, that you do so respectfully and you don't try to do all this gotcha stuff that what it does is it distracts people from the actual issues. So what I want to do is I want this campaign to be an example, and hopefully this example spreads to other districts and then hopefully other states and things of that nature. Because what I want to do is I want people to be well informed on the issues, and I want to hear what people are concerned about, and I want to be able to sit down with them and come up with solutions, and then figure out how we're going to get these solutions written into law. So I think sticking to respectful dialogue is very important in getting these issues done as well.
Well, I think that's something that's kind of been around the Upper Peninsula representatives for a while. Representative Cabensi, who you'd be running against, does get along and vote with Representative Lefebvre and Mark and Senator McBroom. And they have, sometimes they disagree, sometimes they vote against each other, but they're always pretty civil, and it's good to hear that you kind of want to keep that going.
Absolutely, I love it. I've talked to all the aforementioned people there. I've spoken to them all quite a bit, and it's actually a breath of fresh air to. You see what you see on TV, what's going on here and there, and it makes you want to turn the TV off because nothing's getting done there.
Right.
But then you look at our own people up here, and they're actually working together. You actually see them on TV working together, and it's just a wonderful thing. And I do want to keep that going.
Yeah, it definitely seems like sometimes they're Yoopers first and Michiganders second. So that's definitely a cool coalition that they have. And even when they disagree and are respectful for each other. I know that the Second Amendment's a big thing for you, obviously military and all that kind of background. What are your general thoughts on the Second Amendment and what's happening right now? We've had some demonstrations around the country very recently in protest of red flag laws. I just want to give a background, and the Upper Peninsula is a place where there's a lot of hunters and a lot of gun owners too. So just want to give a background on what your stance is on that.
It terrifies me to see what was going on in Virginia, just this week. They're saying you'll get 1 year in prison for each magazine that holds more than 12 rounds, 1 year in prison per magazine, even if it's bought legally. And that applies to a lot of handguns and things of that nature. Right. So I've been around weapons my entire life, and I have been a weapons instructor, for the federal level, and I have taught firearms for decades. I've never seen a firearm hurt somebody on its own. Okay, you hear that all the time. The Second Amendment is bigger than what people think, or what they think when they hear the words Second Amendment. People automatically think gun ownership. It's bigger than that. The Second Amendment was also created as a system of checks and balances when it was created and put into the Constitution. It affords citizens of the United States to keep their government from, you know, becoming like a tyrannical government. You know, so it's your right to bear arms. It's your right to defend yourself, your family, your property, and also to defend yourself from your own government if you have to. And I believe that people should fear a government that is trying to disarm them because they're taking away that system of checks and balances.
But a lot of times you hear, oh, I'm for the Second Amendment, so I think anyone should have a gun for any reason and any kind of gun. Is that kind of where your stance is on that too? Or do you think, I mean, there are a big thing that is, you know, people that have multiple domestic violence issues, you know, should they be allowed to have a gun for any reason or you know, anything like that? Or is there a line in the sand somewhere? It's just not always black and white.
You know, everything's a gray area. When you're looking at operating procedures, you know, and it says, you know, you can do this, but you can't do that. Well, you know, that, because nobody wants to take ownership and say, you know, this is the way it's going to be, or, you know, I'm putting my stamp on it. So there's always that gray area in the middle. Right. You know, without muddying the waters any more than they are, my idea on that, like what you just asked, is, you know, some of the bloodiest battles ever fought in the history of mankind were fought before the invention of gunpowder. Well, you know, people will. That's because
gunpowder hasn't been like modern guns. Even there's just way more time before that. So isn't that a little bit skewed? You know, we've only been, especially in this country, we've only been fighting with guns for a few hundred years when there's been thousands of years of wars. So that's kind of a moot point.
I was saying some of the bloodiest conflicts and some of the worst things that the human mind can conjure up were happening to people before guns were introduced. You know, and I mean, just horrible things. War is terrible, but I don't believe guns are the problem that's fueling violence in this country. It's people, individuals can be dangerous. It doesn't make that gun dangerous. That's where I'm coming from on this, and this is what I honestly believe. I've been around them. My wife, she's a disabled veteran. She has, you know, I don't want to get too deep into it, but she's got some neurological things that affect her her ability to use her hands. Now, her being a retired counterintelligence agent and a soldier, one of the things that we do for therapy for her is she target practices, you know, and so we can go out and it helps her with hand and eye coordination and things like that. So I've seen weapons used in therapy, you know, like that. I just believe that anything in the wrong hands is dangerous. You can put a screwdriver in somebody's hands, and if they have the mental capacity to do harm with that screwdriver, they're going to do it if that's all they can get a hold of. You know, so we don't outlaw screwdrivers if something goes wrong.
But a screwdriver is not going to take down 10 people at once.
Depending on who has it.
I mean, it's very, very rare when that would be able to happen.
I just believe as the individual and what their mindset is that's dangerous. So that's where I stand on that. I don't believe that guns are the problem. And I believe that this individual is the problem. And if you were to snap your fingers and every gun in the world disappeared today, it's not going to be the end.
No, there would still be violence. There would still, yeah, right. But
we're in agreement on that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not, you know, trying to say you're wrong or anything like that. But do you believe that anyone should be able to have a gun for any reason or any kind of gun?
I believe that the citizens of this country have the inherent right to self-defense. I believe that it is written into the Constitution that the Constitution applies to individuals. That's why you can, you know, take somebody's constitutional rights away. You hear that a lot. You know, their constitutional rights were violated. It applies to the individual, and in the Constitution, you have the right to bear arms. Second Amendment. That tells me that if the Constitution protects you as a citizen and of this country, then you should have the right to bear arms. Now, that being said, people do things that take away their constitutional rights because of certain crimes they've committed. They're not allowed to vote. You know, they're not allowed to do this. So I believe that system works.
Okay.
So if somebody has done something to take away their constitutional rights, then I think that's a system that has been working and doesn't need to be touched.
Right. Okay. I guess that kind of gets more to the question I was asking. We've been talking for quite a while now. Is there, as we're kind of wrapping it up here, if someone comes out to an event to see you, what's one thing you kind of want them to walk away with saying after meeting you or talking to you or hearing you listen, or after listening to you talk somewhere? What's one thing you kind of want them to walk away knowing?
I want them to understand that I know how the government works on some different levels, and that I do have the knowledge and the ability to make positive changes, and that regardless of their political affiliation, I want to sit down with every single person and have a cup of coffee and discuss what they're concerned with, because political affiliation is just that. It's just a word that people register under.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I don't share the same values as this person, or that they don't share the same values as me just because they might be a Democrat and I'm a Republican.
Right.
I'd like people to look at me and say, he really does care, and he's not lying when he says, you know, if we work together, we can make this work. You know.
And so people know, where can they find you? I know you're on Facebook, you have a website. You want to just tell a little bit where they can go?
On Facebook, I'm Vote for Matt Goss. I have my Gmail account is votemattgoss@gmail.com. And I have a political website that is mattgoss109.com. And my last name is spelled Goss.
Perfect. So if they want to go and read up more on you, reach out to you, they can use those methods, and you can get back to them and everything.
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. Well, I appreciate you being here, Matt.
Yes, sir.
This was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll see you some other time down the campaign trail. I want to thank all of you for joining us on In Focus here on ABC 10. Have a good afternoon.